And it took a terribly long time. But I thought, if this is symbolism, then my goodness me, it was very, very graphic.
And look how history's gone on to show you were right as well, and now in 2011.
I know. Well, it's, you know, what's happening there is very, very, very interesting. And what's been happening all across North Africa and the Middle East is fascinating.
The last couple of months have just been unprecedented. What's happened in Egypt as well. So you obviously still keep up to speed with news and current affairs and still involved in it, really.
Well, there's so much going on, you know. What I no longer do is I no longer have to, I mean, because I'm home a lot, I no longer have sort of appointment that, you know, you can get it throughout the day. And that's rather nice. I'm always aware of what's going on. And you never lose an interest. What I don't miss is not having to do it, really. I mean, I quite enjoy not having to be involved. But you, of course, keep an interest in what's going on.
And the last couple of months, the last sort of 6 to 8 months especially, have been such an incredible time in world history as well. What's gone up in Egypt? What do you make of like the revolution there in Egypt and how new stuff like social media, Facebook and Twitter has driven a lot of that and became a means for them to you know, overthrow a government, really? Well,
that's been the fascinating thing. I mean, it's a young people's revolution,
and
they're using the new technology to make that revolution possible. And in Egypt, it's been extraordinary. I read something the other day that you know, there was a great explosion in tertiary education in Egypt, and there are a lot of young graduates, and about, you know, a huge percentage of them are unemployed. And so these young educated people, they see what's going on in their country and they don't like it, and they realize that they have the possibility of having a voice through the new media, and to mobilize people as well. And so these changes which governments make, and they don't really, you know, the law of unintended consequences is in operation here. And Mr. Mubarak paid the price.
Where do you see things going forward for Libya, Sir Trevor? You've got some fairly unique experience in that country, you know, sort of chasing Colonel Gaddafi across the desert. How do you enforce a no-fly zone against a man who's not ashamed to get into a JCB and try and knock
down a customs house?
Yeah.
Well, I think with difficulty, and I think, I mean, I am not in a position to make any pronounced judgments about these things, but I do like the Robert Gates position, which is that, you know, you must understand very clearly what a no-fly zone implies, which is that you are going to try to prevent his sort of assets from taking to the air. So you have to go in and knock out all his anti-aircraft positions. And we know that air power like this can not always be terribly, terribly reliable. So maybe we have to put people in there on the ground. Now, our last experience of trying to put a few people on the ground a few days ago didn't quite work out terribly well.
No.
So, you know, do we want to do that? I see the Arab League, according to your news, is now calling for that to be done. Well, good luck to them. I think that NATO and the UN are going to be much, much more circumspect. We are all absolutely horrified at anybody turning against his own people with such ruthless violence. But at the same time, what do? You know, I think there are limits to the way one can intervene these days. And given my experience in Iraq and the difficulty of Afghanistan, I'm not very sure that there's too much of a public appetite for getting involved anymore.
Are you a fan of rolling news? That's something which has come along now, and it's everywhere on the BBC and on Sky and Al Jazeera all over the world as well, and CNN and NBC. Are you a fan of that kind of news coverage? Do you think it adds to what we know, or just?
I think it's great. It keeps people informed, and I think it's one of these sort of ineluctable things. You know, I mean, you can't roll it back anymore now and stop it. I occasionally think that it's a little too quick to make considered judgments about what's going on. In other words, it rolls on so remorselessly quickly that you almost need a kind of pause to say, now, okay, what are the implications of this? What does this mean? How do we, you know, what can we extrapolate from what's gone on?
Yeah.
Now, I think that will always mean that there'll be a place for established bulletins on the hour, and things like the 10 o'clock news and ITV or the BBC and so on, which will always have the chance of giving a more considered view. And programs too, where people and experts are interviewed, to just step back from this onrushing news.
And give it a context. And
trying to, anyway.
Do you think there's more reflection needed? I guess a lot of news readers now have to be commentators as well.
Yes, I mean, you know, this is an argument which has gone on, as you know, for a long time. And, you know, how much should you be? And, you know, we've always tried to separate news from comment. But I think you're right. And I think the the speed with which news happens these days. You know, I mean, it is quite extraordinary that we sit in our living rooms and you sit in your studios and watch these amazing, horrendous pictures from Japan.
Well, you said Japan, yes, it was so visceral and
just,
real time. It
looked like, you know, something out of the apocalypse,
yeah.
really, sort of end of the world stuff. And so, because we have that facility to do this, you know, people tend to make instant judgments, but it keeps. You never stop, you know, and some stuff, you know, you have to pause. I remember in Iraq talking to one of BBC correspondent, actually, who as he was then, Raghi Omar, and we were both on a rooftop doing things, and he said, I said, you know, have you been to so and so, and he said to me, he said, well, to be very honest, I've been standing here doing all these lives to London, and I haven't got out. Now, I think that kind of thing, that phenomenon, is a bit of a problem, you know. This monster needs feeding.
It's constantly on demand,
constantly,
isn't it?
yeah.
And talk about social media. Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook?
I'm not on Twitter.
You have a lot of followers.
Facebook. No, I don't want any followers. I think people will be very misguided to follow anything that I do, really. But no, I use the technology for messages and so on. I use the internet and all that. What I do like, and this is not good news for newspapers, is that I can get on the thing in the morning and read all that's happening, and
but that's the way we want it now. That's great, isn't it? To have that on your inbox.
And I never thought it was possible, because I have a son who is in his 20s and who, I mean, I've never seen him sort of go out and buy paper. But he's terribly well informed. He goes on this every morning, and he's across everything that happens in the world. There's nothing that I can tell him about what's going on that he hasn't seen before.
Are you surprised it took as long as it did for them to realise they were going to start charging for people to read some of the papers online? Because that's the way the majority of people are doing it now.
Yeah, I know. Yes, well, I haven't started paying anything yet. I still please don't tell them, but I still get mine for free.
Rupert Murdoch hears this. He's come around to your house.
Yes, I know.
Unpaid newspaper fees. Okay, we'll come back with Sir Trevor McDonald in a moment. Let's get the latest travel news now with Louise Pepper.
Yes, most of the problems are caused by